Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu-alaikum. Jiayanu, Pakhayra-gale, Ni-hao, Chunashumme, Washmale, Ohio Gonzaimas, Guten Morgen, Ola, Boyo, Privyet, Kaifahal, Halishuma Chatore, Ahlan Wasal, Marhaba, Buna, Mucho, Gracias, Swabi, Balli Kareaya, Hosh Galdin, and Ayosayo, Kuyamora, Chivato, Chihaljot, Kalimera, Kherutan, and a very warm welcome to everybody who's tuned into PTV1 and watching World this morning on a very rainy morning over here in Islamabad. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very lucky that I've been joined by my very well-learned colleague who happens to be Ms. Hajar Satti. I happen to be Shahzad Hasan Khan, and we hope and pray that everybody out there is doing wonderfully well and that you're ready to kickstart your day with us. But first things first, hello Hajar, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you so much, Jazakallah khair, for introducing me, Shahzad. So, weather is wonderful here in Islamabad. We had a very intense shower of the rain, especially when I was commuting from my workplace towards the office. And that has made certainly the weather of Islamabad really, really pleasant. And after fresh showers, Islamabad looks beautiful because it's very clean, it's very fresh, it's very green. But I think we will
But before we move on to that, are you going to treat us with pakoras or samosas?
Yani, you should take the lead and offer us some time, because all the time you're asking, you need to give me this, you need to give that, have a more generous hand in treating us, right? Oh my God.
Well, it's okay, because with chocolates, I think every time you mention it on air, I've always made sure that I bring them, right?
No,
oh my God.
Oh my God, I've been begging you for 1 year, and after 1 year you're giving me, and you have the guts to ask me.
I think I'm on diet today.
I've always made sure, it seems a weird problem with the word always, okay? So we will have
I think I'm going to be on diet today. Gibran, if you can, if you're hearing us,
has been kind enough,
that you can get some samosas and pakoras, he always does. Yes,
but I think we will now have a very interesting debate, because we have papers lying here, right,
yeah,
Shahzad?
A lot of them.
And we have plenty of papers lying here, but again, now after this climate change and a transition towards a more greener atmosphere, we are having this debate that we should now move towards a paperless society, right? Or we need to digitalize a lot of things. But I think we need to have a debate on, the importance of paper, because for me, still, I'm very much glued to the concept of the paper, because we all have those private aspects of our personality that we would like to keep tucked away inside ourselves. And the way I like to regulate emotion is that I write a diary, or I usually what I do is at the night time, I write down whatever is inside me, what is bothering me, right? So this I do it on the paper, and when I do it, it gives me a clarity of thought. And a couple of times I tried doing it on digitally on my mobile phone in the form of the notes, but that does not give me the satisfaction, or I would like to say the magical flow of the words coming out from my pen and dripping into the words. So that is something a very different experience. But yes, I mean, across the offices, we are having this debate that we need to move towards more digital form of that.
And I've moved on to that, Hajar, and so I think that, on this point, we actually come from a very different background, because now imagine that, you've always been that person who's into book reading and all of that, and, you have that feel of the book and the paper.
True.
But for me, I've always
Hard
been,
copies, yeah.
I've always been very digital, may it be my university days, it was the slides, I used to read them on the laptop, really didn't go to the printer, because the queue is going to be too long as well. So I wanted things to be short and quick, and so that, that you have a solution in front of you. But I believe when you are to kind of talk in perspective of climate change and how we really need to save trees in coming days as well, I think moving towards paperless society is something that we really need to focus on. And every single day, once we are done with these, where do we leave these? In our office, and there's no use of them as well. So I think there's been a wonderful initiative by the Honorable Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. And what is it? I think that's something that we would love to share with you guys as well. Please, can we have the visuals now as well? I think this is something interesting to share early in the morning. As Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has assigned the Ministry of Information Technology and relevant departments the task of making Office of the Federal Government paperless. In a statement, he said, no delay in the implementation of e-office in the federal government offices is acceptable. Shehbaz Sharif Saab instructed that the work on all office files should be done through the e-office within a month. He said he would not see any file other than the e-office. Wow.
And I think this file culture reminds me that how much important the digital transition is, because we often hear the stories of the red tapeism within the bureaucracy, that how your file is, straying here and lying there, and sometimes file vanishes, the stuff vanishes. So I think one of the advantage of this digitalization would be that, we might have that haste in executing the task, which is very much important.
Which is why further the Prime Minister said enforcement of e-office is amongst the top priorities of the government to ensure transparency and improvement in the system. He said officers should send files to all government offices through e-office. On the directions of Shehbaz Sharif, and e-office training of Prime Minister's office staff was completed last week. Besides, the Prime Minister personally received files through the e-office as well. Shehbaz Sharif Saab said the e-office is a significant step for the promotion of digitalization and improvement of governance in Pakistan. He also sought a progress report on the implementation of the e-office in next 2 weeks. And thank you so much, Haja, for saying that, because I do know for a fact that how many times, even over here, I'm sorry, but I have to be honest, right? Even in Pakistan television, most of the times, you send your file for an approval, and, you go next week, you chase it up, and they're like, oh, we don't know where the file went. With e-office, I don't think any file is going to go missing until and unless the individual does not really feel interested in your work.
I think a lot of bureaucracy and clerical staff have to work really, really hard in order to come up with the excuses of vanishing. So digital files, because you have the digital archive, and then you send one copy to the person who is the complainant, or whoever is the stakeholder in there.
And it's high time to do that. Why should we always be making sure that our files are kept safe? I think that even with property documents, whatever documents that we have, all of them should be e-documents and should be saved in cloud. Whenever you move on to your newer cell phone, you put in your iCloud or you put in your Google.
I mean, there are a lot of strategic reasons for doing that, and there's an entire mafia that is benefiting from this prolonged activity of vanishing of the files. But I mean, we will save this debate for some other time.
But very quickly, I want to wrap it up as well. This initiative could have come earlier as well. But, to be honest, because my father personally has worked, alhamdulillah, with the Honorable Prime Minister, Mia Mohammad Shehbaz Sharif Saab as well. And he told me once that, that he called a meeting in Punjab when he was the Chief Minister of Punjab at 6 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
And he thought that, at 9 a.m. we will be free to go and have breakfast. So he said when we got free, the other people were there. So he's a really hard-working gentleman. True. And that's something that we love about our Prime Minister.
Right. And now moving on to what we are going to discuss and unroll in our segment today, and that is the importance of strategic studies. So how exactly is strategic studies different from the international relations? What are its subfields? And what are some of the newest trends that are being studied in the strategic studies? We are very glad that we have someone from the university that I had also the honor of studying in, and the department particularly, because I'm also the alumni of that particular department. We are very glad that we have been joined by Dr. Rubina Wasim. She happens to be assistant professor at NASIPS. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Rubina, and thank you so much for coming to our show.
Wa alaikum assalam, and thank you so much for inviting me.
It's an absolute pleasure hosting you. So, Dr. Rubina, number one, tell us about the strategic studies and what are some of the new current trends that are being studied in the strategic studies or your field of expertise?
Okay. Strategic studies is a somewhat subject which provide different strategies. Now, commonly when we define what is a strategy, that's planning. But here, how to make a policy which is good for the defense of a country, which is good for the betterment of a country, in a sense that obviously they will have more opportunities, the individuals, they will have more opportunity, as well as they can give, they will be in a better position to give policy recommendation to a state.
Right.
So strategic studies is basically about the defense, about the geography, about the culture of a country, the ideology of a country, and how that taking along with that ideology they can obviously
and Dr. Rubina, there's this trend within Pakistan, and obviously when I am measuring the quality of the academic research, I'm measuring it with the Western countries, because we know that the knowledge production is coming from the West. So within Pakistan, you would not find a lot of think tanks or a lot of, I would say, these policy elites institutions that are outside the influence of the government, right? So we do not have a lot of independent think tanks, right? And those independence that hinders the research, right? For example, in UK, we have Chatham House, and we've seen how wonderful research papers they are producing, and that's a very independent research, and it's not biased in the favor of the government or the state, right? So how important do you think the establishment of the independent think tank is, and why do you think, there is a missing gap when we talk about it in Pakistan?
Often popped up in my head while Haja was asking this question.
You can go ahead too.
Please go ahead.
Okay. We are sitting in the capital city of of Pakistan,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So we have lots of think tanks here in
Islamabad,
Pakistan,
yes.
in Islamabad specifically, and there are some think tanks which are based on NGOs. Okay. Also, in Islamabad, it's out of debate that think tanks are more influenced. Yes, there are some strategic studies influence when we talk about the nuclear policy. Obviously, you have to be vigilant enough that what is being talked about, and obviously that these are the sensitive matters. Otherwise, in the context of political domain, we have lots of things. Sonober is here, which is I don't know that it's been influenced by any of the party. Then obviously there are CISS, Strategic Vision Institute, and whatnot, CAS and everyone. So there are lots of think tanks in Islamabad. But when you talk about the peripheries, obviously when we talk about the other cities, specifically in Karachi as well, because Karachi is not considered to be a periphery, but obviously
they have economic think tanks, right? Because of the
they
trade.
are more economic because their focus is different.
Right.
And obviously for the climate change and things like that. So they are not politicized in a sense that when we talk about that we should grow more plants, more trees, so that we can make green and nice environment for Pakistan.
Right,
So
but whenever we are to kind of talk about strategic studies itself, I think that people would certainly think that there might be a correlation with international relations as well. Is it so, or is it not so?
Yeah, is it so? No, let me clarify this context. Most of the time, people who are in Pakistan, there is a trend that everyone wants to be doctor, everyone wants to be engineer, and now I'm affiliated to NUST, so it is considered to be an engineering university earlier. But now the social science, and I'm working in the Center for International Peace and Stability, so CIPS is working on the social sciences context, and S3H as well. Now, the point here is that people need to understand that what is the importance of international relations, in a sense that if we talk about international relations, the mother domain is political science. Okay, so after political science, international relations, and there are sub branches of peace and conflict studies, strategic studies, and government and public policy, that's GPP. So there are different domains, but international relations is about how states work and how they make up their relations with each other. But strategic studies is about a country which, let's suppose if we are talking about Pakistan, so how Pakistan, based on the geographical location, based on the historical legacies, how Pakistan should go ahead and make a better policy for a country.
And Dr. Rubina, so we've seen this trend within the international relations or within the strategic studies, that it's guided by, mostly dominated by this paradigm that how a country's defense system should be strengthened in the face of the threats, right? Or its weaponry should be amassed so that we can have a better defense system, right? And so we've seen within the 21st century, this paradigm is evolving and they are broadening the scope of that, right? So do you think when it comes to the policy making circles within the Pakistan, their strategic thinking is also evolving and suiting the needs, modern needs of the 21st century? Where are we going in terms of the policy decision and in terms of the actual work on the ground?
That's a great debate. Let me refer to the Copenhagen school of thought, which says that security is not about all the tangible things. Security is about the non-traditional aspects as well. So economy is also one of the aspects on which strategic studies focus. Climate is also, cyber security, emerging technologies, AI, and many other aspects. You were talking about the climate issue when you were referring to the no paper environment. So it is also one of the contexts that how you can strategize the needs so that you can make a country better, in a sense that they can absorb and international diplomacy of a country can be improved as well. So that's also one of the aspects of it. So it's not about only tanks and WMD, like weapons of mass destruction. It's a lot beyond that.
Exactly, and I think it's about time. It's about high time that we kind of think about that as well, because it brings me back to where you actually stated that that everybody wanted to be a doctor or an engineer. Everybody thought NUST is an engineering university, but yes, obviously there are more disciplines now. Now imagine that if in 2024, today probably for the very first time on television, we're talking about strategic studies, which is a discipline which everybody can go and enroll themselves in. How far-fetched do you think is the idea of implementation of these strategic studies within the policy makers' mindset?
That's an interesting debate, because most of the time it is said that our thesis in academia has some allegations that our theses are just in the libraries and nobody bothers to open those theses and go through those policy recommendations. So bureaucracy is one of the very important aspects, and lots of I personally know lots of students who, after having degrees or in strategic studies, they are working for CSS, they have appeared for CSS, they have qualified for that. Now these bureaucrats, they are well equipped for making those policies, and obviously they can. So there's a need to just bridge that specific gap of policy level studies and policy makers, and specifically academia, which are obviously they are working and theorizing those issues as well.
And Dr. Rubina, we've seen this trend, for example, in the Western countries, and I'm talking about the America, because if you see their policy makers, they are highly guided by the very strong think tanks, right? Like APEC has a very strong influence within the American elite circles when it comes to the politics. But we don't see such sort of trends in Pakistan where the policy making is guided by, a research that is conducted on the ground. Do you think in the coming days we are about to see a change? This thinking is also getting diffused within the Pakistani policy making circles. And when it comes to a very vibrant research, right? Where do you think there are missing gaps? Is it the funding that is missing, or is it maybe we are not producing brilliant enough students who can go and venture into this field? Where are we lagging?
Okay, interestingly, one of our students that who's working in NECDA, and I happen to have a project with him, and the result of that project, we were like working on the national security policies. So there are some people who are referring to. So there are different projects that has been offered by those specific agencies, and based on that, obviously, there are stories, there are success stories where those policy recommendations have been adopted in the policy level decisions.
And how is it usually guided? So imagine that if it's a discipline which is, as of now, probably novel for a lot of people, so people like you, alhamdulillah, we are blessed that we have people like you who are actually taking lead and making sure that there are students who are learning strategic studies. But how do we usually guide strategic studies? Probably it's a deeper conversation, but looking at the geopolitics and the geophysics and everything, do you think that, that we narrow it down for our people, or do you think that the narrative is always open onto how you develop it for your own country?
Yeah, that's also one of the aspect. And let me refer it to here. Most of the time, people who are not getting admissions in medical sciences and anywhere, they opt for international relations or something like that. And then obviously,
and there is a stereotype in the Lyco field, either new admission, but I think that thinking is changing. Right?
No, but interestingly, people having more than 900 marks, I have interviewed those students, and they were interested to come in international relations.
Wow.
And after that, they have got scholarships, and now they are in Harvard, and they are in Oxford and everywhere. So it's like lots of people now know that importance of strategic studies, in a sense that they can understand, and it's not about only a country. If you're not practicing as well, I think that strategic studies also provide you know-how what is happening all around the world.
True.
We are sitting in a very, very vulnerable location, like when we talk about the geostrategic position. In West, lots of things are happening because of Iran and Afghanistan. East, obviously, that historical legacy of India, and China. Everyone is looking towards China. So we are in a position where obviously we cannot be neutral, cannot stay neutral, but we have to plan, or we have to strategize how we can handle this situation, and obviously look towards the future.
And Dr. Rubina, so when we talk about, policy makers being guided by the researchers or the policy making think tanks, or maybe the research which is coming from excellent institutions like NUST, or generally the academia, right? We do see that there is certain gap, but I'm pretty sure in the days to come that will be filled. But again, like then we talk about the strategic studies. Number one, what are some of the current trends or the research work that you are working on? And again, how is it helping Pakistan? Because there is always a debate within the academia that your research should help your society out there, right? Exactly. But Dr. Waqas has a very interesting point of view. He says that your research work should not be guided by always guided by the utilitarian point of view, right? So, for example, Plato wrote about democracy about thousands of years ago when it was not being utilized, but now it's being utilized after so many centuries, after so many years, right? So, please go ahead, answer that.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Let me refer here to that SIPs where I belong to. Most of the time, it's like in SIPs where we have Peace and Keeping Training Institute, where obviously lots of allied officers, they come for the training when they have to go for the United Nations missions. And secondly, we have that peace and conflict studies along with strategic studies, and now that has started international relations as well. Now, in this context, lots of projects of different think tanks, they offer those projects because they want a policy level debate. When we talk about ICRC, we talk about HSF and many others. So they ask for students to work on those directions. So it's lots of things on the climate, as I'm referring, as you were mentioning, Dr. Bakas, about Dr. Bakar, they are one who have worked a lot in the research domain, and obviously Dr. Makki, they have helped create that environment where research has been promoted. And lots of policy debates have been added in. So I was referring to one of the aspect of NACDA, and same here when we talk about ICRC, humanitarian context of international law, and how that it can, how international laws, they are like biological weapon convention and many other conventions, how Pakistan can incorporate so to avoid that biosecurity threat and bioterrorism threat.
Exactly, which is why, you know, how do you think that they, you know, inculcate the nuclear policy within the strategic studies as well? I don't know whether it's the
it's all
most
about
apt
nuclear
question
policy
to ask or not, but yeah, please go ahead.
No, it's completely fine. Commonly it has been understood, the people commonly understand about it that nuclear strategy is all about strategic studies. So it's not about all, but yes, nuclear deterrence, arms control initiatives, they are obviously part of strategic studies. So there are many other, when we talk about the nuclear doctrines of a country, obviously Pakistan don't have a doctrine, but Pakistan has a posture. Based on that posture of first use or no first use and things like that. So the context is that how Pakistan should use its nuclear weapons so that we can deter a country, right?
On our
you know,
our
border.
policy has been defensive always as well. But in addition to this, you know, let us just understand this phenomena. Now imagine that we have had a lot of you know, lawmakers over here, you know, always been contributing and, you know, constituting new laws. Now imagine we have had policymakers over here most of the times. Now what happens is that, you know, for anybody who graduated, you know, from us, probably strategic studies graduate, or anybody, you know, who was a law student and was able to make sure that, you know, that he's going to constitute new laws. What happens is that, you know, a lot of them say that we are an over legislated country, but we certainly do not see, you know, that law actually kind of blessing or prospering within the country as well. Such is the case with the policy and the policy makers. The policy, we would still see that it's there, but we do not see people abiding by those policies. So how do you think that for all of those think tanks to come together, for all of those strategic graduates to come together, and then make sure that, hey, you know what, you know, so whatever we've written, you know, I think that we need to go by that, because if we do not, you know, we might not lead the way we want to lead.
Well, that's an interesting fancy talk, and I can understand that. But for this, on a lighter note, I think the parliamentarians should have a strategic studies degree, because they should know how to make those policies and how to incorporate those policies. And unfortunately, when you say that at least do graduation, they are not happy for that. So it's difficult to convince them to take that degree, so that they can know what policies. Like one of the policy on cyber was came, and they were not aware of it and they just signed it, and many other like LGBTQ and many other issues. So obviously that was being signed, and after that they were like
so what's the future prospect for all of those students who are going to enroll for strategic studies, you know, because I've never ever seen any strategic, you know, position within any organizations that I've been with. Very sorry, I probably, you know, I might be short-sighted as well, but what's the future for those children?
In defense industries like Ministry of Defense, in MOFA, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in different think tanks, in academia, and most of the time the bureaucrats who have obviously learned after. not only
And maybe
sarkari naukri, there are many other like in think tanks. I'm not doing a sarkari naukri, by the way.
But with us, it looks like as if it's a sarkari naukri, right?
No, not at all. Maybe they can go for the CSS, right? That option is also a better option. But Dr. Rubina, thank you so much for having this wonderful conversation. And we will certainly have this conversation, but we are going on a short break. After we come back, don't go anywhere. We have an interesting discussion lined up. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome back, and before going on to the break, we were having a wonderful discussion on the need of evolving the nature of the strategic studies, and obviously that is being done with the passage of time, and how there is a need to decolonize this subject too. And when we talk about the decolonization, obviously it is not limited to the strategic studies. It is a field, a movement, an idea that is emerging from the West, and also it is gaining a lot of traction here in the Asian societies about the move to move away from the Eurocentric nature of the studies. And when we talk about them moving away and developing a counter narrative, obviously the literature from the Islamic society stands in a very huge repute. So I would say Quran is a source of I would say revealed knowledge, and it's a major contribution to the literature out there, because obviously we believe that Allah is the source of all of the knowledge that is flourishing in our society, not just in our society, in this planet called Earth. So we would like to further discuss these detailed studies, that how we can move away from and how there is generally a need to move away from this concept of decolonization, and again then incorporate that concept in making sure that we redo or remake the subject of the Islamic studies, because I think it's more than just the theological debates. It has so much more. It has humanity, it has ethics, it has character building, morals, exactly, social sciences, medical sciences, again natural sciences. So without any further ado, we would like to delve into this concept, and we are glad that we have been joined by Rumesa Rashid. She happens to be a marketer. Assalamu alaikum, Rumesa, and thank you so much for joining us.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. How you guys are doing?
Absolutely perfect, Rumesa. So you might have heard the preamble Hajra has given. I think it was a beautiful connect with what we were discussing earlier. And now to kind of delve into this conversation, obviously with so many sciences out there, you know, how do we actually really need to decolonize where, you know, the Eurocentric education model, how do you think that we as Muslims really need to kind of look for answers from our holy book, Quran?
Yeah. So, beginning that, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, I would say that we generally go and read Quran, and I would always give this example to people around that whenever someone who is of different language and they are pouring some wisdom, be it in French or German, you would have a translator to understand what they are saying, not just listen to that. When we talk about Quran, is from the creator of literally everything. So think about the wisdom it has got inside of it. And when we are just reading that, of course, we are getting a lot, but we are missing so much what is inside, because if the Arabic is not a language, that's irony, because when we are in Pakistan, the Arabic is not being taught to us. And when we are unable to understand what are the meanings and we just keep on reading, we are actually missing that core wisdom that is being sent to us for our guidance.
For highlighting this aspect. And when I was commuting from my house to the workplace, and I was listening to very interesting discussion where they talk about, for example, Nahjul Balagha. It's a beautiful book, and it has a compilation of the quotes of Hazrat Ali Razila Ta'ala Anhu. And they were having this discussion that why do we frame it under the Islamic studies? Why we do not study it under the humanities? So for example, we do study Confucius, right? There are lots of quotes that we are still quoting from the Confucius, all of these, ancient ancient philosophers, the thinkers. So why are we not sort of giving the same importance to Nahjul Balagha, which could be, which is, I think, not could be, sorry, pardon my words, a common heritage of humanity, right? Because knowledge and the ilm and the wisdom is the common heritage of the humanity, as I would like to say. So when we are talking about developing a counter narrative, and that too taking from the Islam, from our tradition, where are we lacking? Why don't we project these things on the international arena as a counterpart to what is coming from the West?
Yeah. So thank you for highlighting that books like Nahjul Balagha. There is another book written by a very famous author and who has done a brilliant tafsir in Arabic, Ibn Kathir, from start to end. That book literally talks about from the start, from Hazrat Adam to the end of last prophet, and how people were coming in, bringing the guidance for people around. So it has a lot of wisdom. But unfortunately, our books that are being taught to at the academic level are just giving them a very, very basic information. And unfortunately, even when we are out of that academics, we generally don't make a lot of effort to then understand and get to the knowledge what has not been taught to us during academics, but we always have time. Like for instance, if like AI is pretty much in, and there are certain things coming in, the information technology is really getting advanced. So we always try to get our hands-on experience, and we try to get some courses, we try to get some seminars through that. But when it comes to Quran learning, we just focus on what has been taught to us in childhood, or we just do the basic things, and we stay on that. We never get out from our comfort zone. So if you talk about people like Imam Ibn Bukhari, who has compiled all the ahadith, and if you study their lifestyle, they were traveling like miles and miles with hunger, with thirst, and they were not having literally anything, just compiling the wisdom, because that wisdom is actually the asset of a Muslim. And there's a lot more with, yeah.
Yeah, I think what we really need to kind of talk about over here is, now imagine that, in 2024, we're still talking about that, how, we've always had a religious context with the holy book Quran, right? Imagine that, that Quran itself talks about galaxies, how there will be more galaxies in coming days as well. It talks about stars, all sorts of sciences, social sciences. Haja has always spoken about it. Why do you think that we've always had a religious context to it, but not a context of learning? Now imagine hum usko chumenge, upar rakh denge, and that's pretty much about it. How do you think that people really need to jot it down, whether how to learn from the holy book Quran? And do you think that, that we should actually introduce different chapters in probably different subjects as well, wherever they are relevant?
And I think adding to the what Shahzad has mentioned, so if you see the early scientists, the Muslim scientists, for example, Ibn Sina, for example, Jabir bin Hayyan, or Imam Jafar as-Sadiq, you would find that they were not just, the philosophers, they were also mathematicians, they were also very good in the medical sciences, they were doctors, they were coaches, they were also at the same time very wonderfully doing in the chemistry, right? Because their philosophical basis of that ilm or knowledge stemmed from the holy book Quran and ahadith, right? But if you see the traditions in the Western culture here, if one person is a mathematician, he cannot be a scientist, right?
Yeah.
If he is a scientist, then he cannot be someone expert in international relations. It's a very, diverse sort of a fields that cannot converge at one point, right? So do you think there is a need to revert back to those old age traditions of the Quran and of the hadith and science? And when we talk about the decolonization, it starts from incorporating Quran into our studies, not just under the garb of Islamic studies, but humanitarian studies too.
Yeah. So thank you for asking this. Thank you for asking this, because Quran literally has got everything inside. It's not just religious thing, but the core is of course a religious thing, because you have to surrender yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the creator. And then when you talk about physics and mathematics, Allah has mentioned that there are doors of the sky, and then no one has thought that how the distance is measured. So it's all physics, and one can really deep dive into that. So when someone who is reading that and getting the whole crux of meaning and really deep diving towards the information, Allah opens door for them, because what you want to get from Quran, you will get that. If you want to get the guidance, you will get the guidance. If you want to get the knowledge, you will want to get the knowledge. So all those scientists who are talking about, and even the prophets, and during the life of prophets, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that was really, Quran was the sole guidance. The people were getting, even I really talk about mental health, which is a core thing, and people who gets to depression and gets to anxiety, they generally have two things. One is sadness, when they feel like they don't have control over what has happened in past, they cannot do anything now, and they get depressed. And the other thing is anxiety, which actually comes from the fear of unknown, fear of not having something in the future, or fear of having the similar past or anything. That is so not focusing on the present, but focusing on the future. And these two things categorically picked by Quran and given the solution in the first surah that if you do certain things, you will not get two things. So it clearly says that وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ تَحْزَنُونَ. So it's the reason of mentioning these two things is because that's a core, and we are created by Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, who knows what we will go through. We will go through the fear. We will go through the anxiety, and when we do certain things, like one is doing the charity, one is following the instruction being sent to us, and one is following what has been guided and following all the arkan, they will not get through that. It's multiple times mentioned in Quran.
I think thank you so much for saying that. Now
Right.
imagine, I think our question becomes more relevant now. Imagine that, just a few days ago I was reading this article where the medical science now says that, by eating dates, the labor pain will be reduced as well. Now imagine that in Quran, Allah has actually asked Bibi Maryam to kind of take dates, right? Now imagine that if we are to kind of relate those subjects with, or integrate those subjects with medical science, with research, with sociology, with the livelihood of people, it will become easier to not just understand, but to learn Quran by heart. Now, for example, if I am to go somewhere, it actually tells me the way how I need to live my life, and it actually tells me how I really need to be hygienic, how I really need to sit down, stand up. Almost every aspect of life is covered in it. But yet till date, we are unable, unfortunately over here, I'm not sure about the other parts of the country, as I fall short on my research on this as well. But do you think that in coming days, people like you can actually spearhead and make sure that we take our chapters and we make sure that we instill them wherever they are required in whatever subjects?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for bringing the example.
We kept on bringing it up.
I think there is some sort of
Yeah, it's fine
disruption
now.
coming on, and we will try to reconnect back. But I think when we talk about the decolonization and when we talk about moving away from the Eurocentric model, so I would like to again throw this question to Dr. Rubina here. So Dr. Rubina, when we talk about, again, decolonization, when we talk about the counter narratives, so obviously that means speaking something from the Asian societies, right? Because, and there is generally a movement, this is gaining a lot of traction in the Western societies. So you will see there's a lot of focus on indigenous studies, indigenous knowledge, the rights of indigenous people, local people. So when we are creating the counter narrative, how can we make sure that the voices from within Pakistan are strong enough to reflect in that counter narrative, coming from your own field of expertise, that is strategic studies?
So interestingly, that takes the debate towards the strategic culture, which I was referring earlier as well. Like if a country knows that how their policies should be made, and it should be within that country, it should not be from any other. So all the countries, they are obviously Commonwealth member, they have to face those consequences, because the legacies of the colonial rulers, they are there. That's why lots of time the definition of development, the definition of what we would say that educated person is related to what colonial rulers have taught us. So right now, when we talk when we are talking about the indigenous strategic thought, here comes the debate that how there are different strategies they have worked, like Kautilya, like we are referring to China, Sun Tzu. These are the strategists who have made strategies based on their own countries, based on their own requirements. So based on those strategies, we can obviously work further for that. And interestingly and unfortunately, lots of time we lack the debate, the narrative from within the country. So it's like Western people talking about that's how Pakistan is, and this narrative need to be cut down.
And that's a very interesting debate, because when we talk about the indigenous knowledge, those debates should generate from within our country, right? But now what we are seeing is those
and they should be acceptable as well.
Exactly, and they are coming from the other societies, and we are adopting it because, I don't know, it's a trendy thing, and it's forced sometimes. Exactly. So Dr. Rubina, when we talk about all of this movement and strategic culture, and you're talking about those debates should emerge from within, so I think that's a very important, interesting debate that I'm always interested in, that is the separation of the religion from the politics, right? So this is a debate which is started from the West after the Enlightenment period, right? And we do see that it is still within our society, right? And we cannot say about that because we are Islamic society and there is no conception of the separation of the religion from the politics. It is essentially an aspect of that, right? So how can we reconcile both of these concepts within the Pakistan?
And it's a very debatable thing, by the way. And
but your
obviously,
opinion.
I will not have fatwa after that.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about, in a sense, that when Protestants and Catholics, they were fighting in Europe and they decided to just make their religion within that church, and obviously it will not be affected in the policy making level. So here the debate, when we talk about in South Asian, not even South Asia, it's about Asian thought. So it's very difficult to segregate. It's not about only Pakistan. It's about all the Muslim countries as well.
Or all the religions as well.
All the religion. In fact, all the religions except those communists, because they are obviously they are in a different domain. Otherwise, commonly it's because of that they think that if you segregate that, so you will not be out of that religion.
Right.
So that debate is there.
And indeed you will save a lot of blood loss, but I think secular ideology is as much, I would like to say, efflusive and committing a lot of gruesome sort of an act. So for example, if you see the atomic bombings of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki, you know, there was no religious ideology guiding it, right? The massacres coming in Afghanistan and Iraq, there was
and
no
unfortunately, when we talk about nuclear bomb here in Pakistan, so it's like categorized as
it's
Islamic bomb,
Yeah.
which is obviously
Islamic bomb,
not
right?
the case.
We don't categorize American bomb as a Western Christian bomb,
But
right?
why we categorize it as an Islamic
And I
bomb?
think that's where, you know, the dialogue needs to come from within. You know, I think and that's how it's going to become more acceptable as well.
It was because of our security needs that Pakistan decided to go nuclear.
Do you think that
so it's like based on the policies, based on the requirements, based on the needs within.
Right.
That
And that's where strategic studies comes in as well. But very quickly, Rumesa has been with us as well. So
So I will just cover the debate that strategic studies is the subject which should be covered by because laymen, they are very keen to suggest Prime Minister that this should be done and this should
without
be done
any understanding.
Without any understanding. So that awareness should be
guided by the research,
That's
right?
wonderful. So Rumesa, you know, in the light of Holy Book Quran, you know, how important it is for anybody to understand the job that they are doing. Rumesa, are you around?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you please repeat? The voice is breaking.
So how important in the light of Holy Book Quran it is to be relevant to the current times and current affairs and whatever's happening in the world?
Yeah. So it's pretty much important just to be connected to your own soul and what is being sent to you. So likewise, I was mentioning that we talked about that when Hazrat Maryam was in a difficulty, it was asked to give us the date. So we tell people too that when they are in a difficulty, they should rest or they should just grieve about it, rather than Quran has clearly mentioned that you need to do an effort. So actions are pretty much important. And if you think about this, everything that connects to you in the Quran and in literally everything is the action that drives the result. So it's pretty much important for people to understand the essence of an action and taking an action in the direction what is being sent to us.
Thank you so much, Rumesa, for spilling the beans for all of us as well. I think it was a wonderful answer to wrap it up, and I believe that, you know, once this debate is going to start from within, you know, we start to build these narratives, only then people will have the patience to be sitting within those debates as well. Because for now, if there's one person who actually knows what he's talking about, the other person will not just agree because of the fact that the other person is going to win an argument. I think that's where we will start moving. We haven't even started moving because nobody's got the patience to listen to what the person's saying, right?
And we need to move away from, you know, listening to hearing what other person is trying to understand. So thank you so much, Dr. Rubina, for coming here. Thank you so much, Rumesa, for having this wonderful exchange of ideas regarding the Quran and how there's a need to incorporate it in our daily life, not just in the Islamic sense, but also in the more humanitarian sense. Because again, when we say Islam is the religion of fitrah, it's very close to our nature because Allah has designed it, ordained it, and that too seeing our nature. So with that, we are bidding you farewell. Until next time, it's a goodbye and good morning.
Dera Manana.